Her name was Kesha Washington, a 34-year-old decorated Air Force colonel who had learned to sleep anywhere after years of missions where rest was a rare luxury. But on that flight over the North Atlantic, her instincts awoke the moment she heard the trembling voice of co-pilot James Wilson announcing a medical emergency, Captain Mitchell unconscious, and a desperate need for anyone with combat aviation experience. And while panic gripped the Boeing 747's 312 passengers, with children crying, prayers rising, and farewell messages being typed, Kesha quietly stood up in her simple jeans, blouse, and tied-back hair, ignored by most who judged her as ordinary, while Richard Blackwood, a wealthy businessman, arrogantly claimed his civilian flight hours made him qualified. But when Kesha calmly introduced herself as Colonel Washington with 500 hours in F-22 Raptors and expertise in extreme navigation, the cabin fell silent, disbelief painted on Blackwood's face, yet respect in Wilson's eyes as Kesha flawlessly recited emergency procedures only a true military pilot would know, silencing doubt, but not arrogance, as Blackwood demanded credentials, forcing Kesha to relive memories of years of prejudice, being doubted, passed over, and whispered about, yet always proving herself by transforming injustice into fuel. And now, in the middle of a Category 5 storm, she faced the ultimate test, not to prove herself to the arrogant or the privileged, but to save hundreds of lives and remind the world that real strength and brilliance often come wrapped in appearances that society is too blind to recognize. Every insult into motivation. Kesha Washington stood in the storm-tossed Boeing 747, her calm presence commanding a silence that even thunder could not break as she turned to Richard Blackwood, her voice steady and sharp. Mr. Blackwood, there are three kinds of pilots in this world: those who fly when it's easy, those who fly when it's hard, and those who fly when it's impossible. She stepped toward the cockpit, pausing only to remind him that she had saved 17 aircraft in situations manuals called unrecoverable, but what truly qualified her was surviving war zones with 2 engines out, no navigation, missiles on her tail, and still bringing her squadron home. And as the plane dove violently, she didn't even flinch, her balance as unshakable as her resolve. Before delivering the final blow, when they landed and she promised they would, he would have to reflect on how a black woman he dismissed as unworthy of first class had just saved his life and his family's. Inside the cockpit, chaos raged, Captain Mitchell convulsing, foam spilling from his mouth as alarm screamed, James Wilson frozen with terror, until Kesha's command voice cut through like steel, ordering first aid, checking vitals, and handling instruments with the precision of someone forged in combat, her 10 years of rescue missions making her as skilled in emergency medicine as in flying. While outside, Richard poisoned first-class minds with doubts, sneering that someone dressed so simply couldn't possibly be qualified, until even his wife Victoria broke her silence to call him ridiculous, her words drowned out by Kesha's announcement over the intercom. "This is Colonel Washington. I will be taking command of this aircraft until we reach our destination." The authority in her tone was absolute, turning passengers' panic into hushed obedience and transforming James into a capable co-pilot as she tasked him with fuel and pressurization checks, her hands flying over controls as she plotted an unorthodox trajectory through the storm instead of around it. James protested. Protocols demanded otherwise, but Kesha's smile, the first since taking command, carried both memory and defiance. In Afghanistan in 2018, she had flown a crippled aircraft through sandstorms and missile fire, ignoring the manual to save 17 wounded soldiers, proving that sometimes survival meant breaking rules at the right time. As she spoke, Blackwood barged into the cockpit, waving his entitlement like a weapon and declaring her insane, demanding to take over or contact control, but Kesha didn't even glance at him, her voice ice-cold as she dismissed him with a single cutting line. "Mr. Blackwood, this cockpit is no place for tourists. Return to your seat." Richard's voice rose an octave as he boasted, "I've flown in more private jets than she has in her entire life. I know aviation, and what she's doing is collective suicide." But at that moment, something unexpected happened. Dr. Patricia Chun, chief of neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins, who had been silent till then, stood from first class and calmly approached the cockpit. introducing herself to Colonel Washington as someone with 3 years' experience in military hospitals treating pilots with neurological trauma and offering to monitor Captain Mitchell. Kesha welcomed her with professional respect, recognizing her as a fellow lifesaver forged in crisis, while Richard grew more frantic, accusing them all of conspiring to kill the passengers until Dr. Chun cut him down with the authority of someone who had faced hysteria countless times, reminding him she had treated hundreds of military pilots and that Kesha's training was beyond anything money could buy. Richard scoffed, demanding proof, and without missing a beat on the controls, Kesha ordered James to tune to emergency military frequency 121.5, calmly. Identifying herself to Andrews Air Force Base as Colonel Washington, call sign Spectre. The radio crackled with immediate recognition, Commander Rodriguez confirming her identity and revealing that the entire U.S. Air Force was already mobilized searching for her missing plane, silencing the cabin and draining the color from Richard's face as he realized he had grossly underestimated one of the most decorated pilots in American history. Kesha reported their dual crisis, an incapacitated captain and a violent storm system, and was instantly given top priority, with all East Coast airspace cleared and Baltimore prepared for an emergency landing, prompting Dr. Chun to smile at Richard's humiliation as she asked if he knew many tourists who could summon the entire Air Force with a single call. But the situation escalated when Commander Rodriguez relayed chilling updates. Winds at 180 kilometers per hour, hail the size of baseballs, and every airport closing, leaving Kesha's Boeing 747 the only aircraft still in American skies. With unshakable calm, she instructed James to monitor vertical speed while she attempted something never before tried in a commercial jet, a controlled spiral descent through the eye of the storm, a maneuver adapted from military fighters. Her hands moved with supernatural precision, as if the plane were an extension of her body, leaving James in awe and prompting another controller, General Patricia Hayes from the Pentagon, to confirm her legendary reputation, recalling her 2019 feat guiding a crippled C-130 through a sandstorm using only radio communication, a skill she had repeated with 17 aircraft throughout her career. Richard felt his arrogance collapse as he realized he wasn't in the presence of mere confidence, but of a living aviation legend whose tactics were studied by enemies worldwide. Dr. Chun warned that the upcoming G-forces could affect Captain Mitchell's condition, but Kesha pressed forward, ensuring General Hayes confirmed all other flights had been diverted and declaring that no one must attempt to follow their path. With 13 military bases watching and even the president briefed on their survival, Richard's world spun as he tried to stammer out an apology, only for Kesha to cut him off with ice-cold focus. Your apologies can wait. Right now, I need to save your life and everyone else's. And with that, the Boeing 747 plunged into a spiral descent that defied the very laws of aeronautical physics. Kesha had found a descending column in the center of the storm, a relatively stable air tunnel that allowed for a controlled drop beneath the turbulence, and James, stunned by the instruments, whispered, "My God, how did you know that current existed?" To which she calmly replied, 10 years flying hostile weather systems in the Middle East, sandstorms, man-made hurricanes from explosions, conditions not found in civilian manuals. When you survive the impossible repeatedly, the extraordinary becomes routine. Commander Rodriguez's voice came over the radio, disbelieving what radar showed. A Boeing 747 descending at 4,000 feet per minute yet remaining stable, to which Kesha answered, "Applied physics, Commander, and 17 years of experience turning impossible situations into safe landings." Lightning ripped through the clouds like apocalyptic fireworks as the giant aircraft glided through the storm's eye, impossibly steady, and with unshaken focus, Kesha requested coordinates for Dover Air Force Base. General Hayes confirmed, "Runway cleared, foam applied, ambulances waiting, absolute priority granted." "James, when we touch down, you'll see why they call me Spectre," she said with the faintest smile since assuming command, and over the next 15 minutes Richard Blackwood witnessed a mastery of skill and courage that shattered his shallow assumptions of competence, authority, and heroism. When the wheels finally kissed the runway, history shifted, not only for Kesha, who proved herself one of the greatest pilots America had ever produced. But for civil aviation itself, as new emergency protocols and policies would emerge from that day. 6 months later, at the Pentagon, Kesha Washington was promoted to Brigadier General, the youngest black woman in history to hold the rank, her storm navigation technique adopted in military manuals worldwide, and 3 universities creating chairs in her honor. General Washington saved not only 312 lives that day, the Secretary of Defense proclaimed, she redefined how we evaluate competence versus appearance in our armed forces. Dr. Patricia Chun, applauding proudly, had since co-authored with her a landmark paper on emergency aviation medicine, while James Wilson, now a captain himself, credited Kesha as his ultimate inspiration. Meanwhile, Richard Blackwood faced a brutal reckoning. Video of his prejudiced remarks during the flight had gone viral with over 50 million views. His investment firm collapsed, 80% of clients gone, and bankruptcy forced upon him. The final blow came at home when his 12-year-old daughter asked innocently, "Daddy, why do people get mad when they see your name on Google?" And with his wife Victoria filing for divorce, taking custody and half the remaining assets, Richard was left with nothing but the bitter, unforgettable irony of having underestimated a woman who had become a living legend. "I married a man who admired success," she told the judge, "but I discovered I had lived for 15 years with someone who confuses privilege with competence." Richard now worked as a salesman at a used car dealership, relying on public transportation, trapped in the ordinary life he once despised. Every morning, he passed a massive billboard showing Kesha in full military uniform beneath the words, "Leadership has no color, it has character." During a lecture at the Air Force Academy, a cadet asked Kesha how to handle prejudice. "Young man," she replied, "let them underestimate you. While they waste their energy doubting your abilities, you use that same energy to build skills they can never deny." Her story inspired a generation of minority military cadets, and her book Flying Through the Storms became a bestseller, with all profits funding aviation scholarships. 3 years later, Richard saw her again in an airport. She, in the uniform of a decorated general, surrounded by aides and security. He, in his dealership blues, dragging a cheap suitcase. "General Washington," he said quietly, "I'd like to properly apologize for what happened on that flight." Kesha regarded him, no longer the arrogant man from before but a broken one, and answered, "Mr. Blackwood, you gave me the greatest gift that day." Confused, he asked how. "You reminded me why I do what I do. Every person I save, every pilot I train, every barrier I break, all of it is fueled by people like you, who give me reasons to prove them wrong." Richard swallowed hard, whispering, "I lost everything because of my prejudices." "No, sir," Kesha corrected gently. "You discovered you never had anything real to lose. Privilege is not achievement. Respect is not inheritance. Competence is not appearance." As she walked away with her team, Richard realized the harshest truth of his life. The woman he had once judged unfit to fly a plane now commanded squadrons, while he, who once saw himself as superior, could barely manage his own existence. Kesha's revenge was never to destroy Richard Blackwood, but to build a legacy so luminous that his smallness became invisible in its light. She had proven that success is not only the best revenge, it is the only revenge worth having. In her last interview, she put it simply, "While they waste time underestimating us, we spend that time becoming unforgettable." Have you ever been underestimated by someone who later realized they made the biggest mistake of their life? Share your story of overcoming adversity in the comments, and subscribe for more inspiring stories that prove greatness never asks permission to shine.